Hello everybody, I'm Ajit K. Mishra, your course instructor for Literature and Coping Skills. I'm here again with another lecture on personality. If you remember, in our last meeting I talked about personality from a variety of perspectives. I started with the idea of what personality is all about and how we need to understand personality. And I focused on a variety of things. So let's take a quick look at those things that we discussed in our last meeting. I started by defining personality on the basis of those 4 definitions which I had selected from different sources. So those definitions helped us understand what personality is and what it is not. And we moved on to focus on the nature of personality, the characteristics of personality, how personality is in fact an important concept, and how personality evolves and how it is shaped. So when we moved to the last segment of our discussion of personality, we focused on the shaping of personality, and we saw how a variety of factors in fact determine and influence how a personality will ultimately be. So these are some of the things that we discussed in our last meeting, and in this lecture I'm going to focus on personality and the other aspects associated with it. So to give you an idea of what exactly I'm going to talk about today is the first thing, that's personality theories. We need some kind of theoretical scaffolding so that our understanding of personality becomes even better. So therefore I have selected the most important personality theories that will help us with a clear understanding of the idea. And we are going to focus especially on these 2 important theories, type theories and trait theories, because they're the most popular theories and universally accepted theories, especially the trait theory. Therefore, we are going to focus on an important trait theory in order to help ourselves understand personality better. And I'm also going to talk about personality and well-being, because we need to understand the connection between personality and well-being so that we begin to work on our personalities so that we can ensure our well-being. So let's take a look at each of these components. So to start with, we have type theories. The most important, most popular type theories are ABCD type theories or A and B type of personality, and we are also familiar with the Myers and Briggs personality types. Okay, it's very popularly known as MBTI, Myers and Briggs type indicator. So this type of test is conducted in order to determine the personality types that people have. So type theories starts with a conviction that there are only a limited type of personalities in the world, therefore we can easily classify those types. So that's the reason why it is based on certain classifications. We will be taking a look at it. The second important theory is the trait theory of personality, that strongly believes that personality is comprised of broad traits or dispositions. I have already talked about dispositions and traits in our last meeting. If you remember, it will help you. So there are certain innate dispositions and inclinations that we all have, and our personality is comprised of those broad traits and dispositions. And these traits are internal characteristics. I repeat, the internal dispositions and inclinations that are genetically based. So we have certain innate traits in ourselves, And the trait theory of personality is based on these innateness. Gordon Allport was a very important theorist who started it all. He was the first to initiate the idea of trait theories with the help of his lexical hypothesis that helped him understand that there are as many as 4,000 personality traits. So when I say personality traits, that means the traits that I talked about at the very beginning of the other lecture on personality. For example, calling somebody active, lazy, easygoing, so are some of the traits. So these are the traits that in fact constitute our personality. So the lexical hypothesis performed by Gordon Allport yielded as many as 4,000 traits. And then we have different kinds of traits as proposed by Allport, like the common traits. Common traits are those traits that are commonly shared among a large number of people. So for example, I may be active and I may not be the only person to be active. There may be other people who are as active or even more active than I am. So being active is a trait, personality trait, that is shared by a large number of people. Therefore, it is called a common trait. So there are so many other traits that are also shared by a large number of people. They are common personality traits. There are central traits. Central traits, in fact, become unique to our personality, because these central traits determine the uniqueness of our personality, how we are, and those are the traits that easily distinguish us from the others. So we may have a certain type of trait in a different degree or a different manner, in a different disposition, and that may be unique to us. Therefore, they are the central traits that determine our personalities. And then there are the cardinal traits. The cardinal traits are those dominant traits in our personality that become synonymous with us. They become so dominant that we come to be recognized or known by those traits. So, for example, if we can think about Kalam, our previous president, he had certain cardinal traits. He was so easygoing, he could easily get comfortable in any condition with anybody. So the moment you think about somebody, the trait that reminds you of that person is in fact the cardinal trait of that person. So anytime you think of a person and you think of a trait, that means that trait is a cardinal trait. That trait has become synonymous with the personality of that particular person. So therefore, it's important that we understand the common traits, the central traits, and the cardinal traits. Then we come to Raymond Cattell. Raymond Cattell went on to talk about 16 universal traits that people possess, and he thought that people possess these traits in varying degree. It's not that you possess just one trait and that's all. According to Cattell, people possess all these traits in varying degrees. That means you may be high on one particular trait, low on another trait, and medium on some other traits. So in a way, you have access to all those traits, or your personality is a combination of all those traits. So he talked about a universal continuum, in fact. That means one trait leading to the other, and that's how all these traits are complementary to each other. So Raymond's 16 traits in fact helped the 5-factor model a great deal. We'll be talking about the 5-factor model in a while. Then we come to Hans Eysenck. Eysenck said that there is no need to go for so many traits. There is no need to classify personalities with the help of so many traits or types. Let's go for 3 universal traits. That is extroversion or extraversion, neuroticism and psychoticism. So Eysenck was of the opinion that everyone has some amount of extraversion, neuroticism and psychotism in himself or herself. So these are universal traits, and everybody has all these traits in varying degrees. Somebody may be highly extrovert, somebody else may be highly neurotic, or somebody else may be highly psychotic. So we all have these traits in ourselves. That's exactly what Eysenck thought. That brings us to the 5-factor model. So the 5-factor model, or the Big 5 model as it is alternatively known as, it was developed on the basis of all these traits that people had talked about, starting with Allport, then Cattell, then Eysenck. So the 5-factor model is in fact a synthesis of all the traits that these theorists had talked about earlier. So the 5-factor model focuses on the most important and universal traits that are almost common to all of us. They are also in a continuum. That means we have all these traits in a certain varying degree in ourselves. That means I may be high on agreeableness and low on neuroticism. I may be high on extroversion and low on conscientiousness. So we all have these traits in varying degrees in ourselves. So we'll be taking a closer look at the 5-factor model for our understanding of personality. Then we come to the psychoanalytic theories. As we all know, the father of psychology, Sigmund Freud, developed psychoanalytic theories. These theories are also alternately called psychodynamic theories of personality. So the psychoanalytic theories focus a lot on the unconscious mind. So because they think that the influence of the unconscious mind on personality is the most important thing that we need to understand. If you remember, in my last lecture I told you that personality psychologists have been trying very, very hard to understand the working of psychological factors on personality, and this is one such attempt. So the idea is to study the influence of the unconscious mind on personality, so that we get to understand the workings of the personality. So that's a system which was initiated by Freud. Then we come to the behavioral theories popularized by Skinner and Watson. They were of the view that the interaction between individual and the environment is what constitutes the core of our personality. That means our personality is determined to a great extent by this interaction between an individual and the environment. So whether it's a healthy interaction or an unhealthy interaction, whether it's a complementary interaction, or whether it's an interaction of conflict, all these determine how the personality will finally be shaped, because it was based on behavioral aspects. So the behavior of a certain entity, an individual, in a certain environment will ultimately decide the personality of that person. Then we move to another very important personality theory, the humanist theory, which was propounded by Rogers and Maslow. They talked about the power, the importance of free will, so that an individual can act freely in the greatest interest of the person, and they focused a lot on individual experiences. So the individual is at the center in humanist theories. So a very popular model that was proposed by Maslow is known as the need hierarchy, which suggests that individuals will start with the basic needs and move up in the ladder and will finally go for self-actualization. Until and unless the basic needs are satisfied, are fulfilled, individuals will continue to find it very, very difficult to move towards their self-actualization. So the personality is also dependent on how these needs are satisfied or fulfilled. So humanist theories focus on the individual, the free will and individual experiences. So that brings us to the two important theories that I am planning to focus on in this lecture, because those two theories make our understanding of personality better. Therefore, I have selected these two theories. The first is the type theory. As I have already told you, there are four different types of personality according to the type theories. So type A, perfectionist, impatient, work obsessed, stressed, achievement oriented and aggressive. So people who have this type of personality are in fact workaholics. They know nothing except work. Therefore, they believe in perfection. They are impatient because until and unless the work is finished, they cannot control their patience. They will continue to be impatient. They are absolutely work obsessed because they know nothing except work. And therefore, they experience a lot of stress. But this stress is not distressing, it's not disturbing, because it keeps them up on their toes so that they can remain activated all the time and they remain focused on their work. And these people are achievement oriented. They believe in achievements. And that's the reason why you can see a close connection among all the traits listed under this category, whether it is perfectionism, impatience, work obsession, stress, achievement orientation, or even aggression. Aggression of a different kind. This is not aggression that will destroy or that will lead to some kind of problem. This kind of aggression that is required of some kind of work obsession or perfectionism. So these are the people who are perfectionists and they are a work obsessed people. The second type of personality, which is known as type B personality, includes those people who are easygoing. Therefore, they are a little lazy, but they are persuasive and they are flexible. Since they are persuasive, they are flexible and they are creative. They are also patient, because easygoing people need to be patient, persuasive people need to be patient, and all these people need to be flexible and creative, because if you are creative, you can quickly devise ways to address a certain problem. So these people are very, very creative, they are patient, they are flexible, and they are persuasive as well. We come to a third type. This type of people are conscientious, analytical, calm, dependable, but at the same time they are also incapable of expressing their own feelings. These people are dependable. They help others a lot. They are Samaritans. But these people are incapable of expressing their own feelings. Although they are very, very logical. When you look at the word analytical, you'll find that these people are very rational, logical. At the same time, they are also conscientious. The only problem this type of people have is the incapability of expressing their own feelings. So as a result of which, people who have this type of personality do not express their emotions or feelings often or freely. So therefore, this type of people are subjected to some kind of emotional disturbances. And this type of people are also susceptible to emotional challenges because of their incapability of expressing their feelings and emotions. And that's the reason why I have used, I have encircled this category. The other category that I've also encircled is the next category, and that is type D category. Now, this is the most difficult of all categories. So people who are in this category are affected, are influenced by negative affectivity, NA, and social inhibition. As a result of these two issues, these two problems, people in this category experience anxiety, pessimism, hopelessness, and lack of confidence. Negative affectivity, that means people always adopt a negative approach towards life situations or life positions. So they are so moved by this negative affectivity that they become pessimistic in their approach, and they cannot see any bright thing, any bright aspect in anything. And as a result of which they become hopeless. Social inhibition is also a major problem that hinders such people from expressing themselves, and that results in their lack of confidence. So people in this category are very, very anxious, they are pessimistic, they are hopeless, and they lack confidence. So this category is in fact the problem category, the category that spells a lot of problems for people who have this type of personality. So we need to focus on people who have this type of personality. So type C people have problems to some extent, but type D people have problems to a large extent. So that's the reason why I have enclosed these two categories, so that we can focus on each of them. We can now move to the trait theories, especially the 5-factor model of personality, which is very popularly called the Big Five model of personality. So I must tell you all that we experience these traits, or we have these traits in some amount in us. We may be high on one of these traits, or two of these traits, and low on the other traits. So, or we may be high on just one trait and low on the other traits. We may be high on several traits and low on just one or two traits. So that may be the case. So they in fact create a continuum for us. It's a universal continuum, and we have these traits in all of us. Openness, people who have this particular trait are very, very creative. If somebody is creative, then you know that that particular person has openness, and therefore the person is open to new ideas and feelings and behaviors. So such people have feelings, and their feelings in fact constitute their behaviors. So these people are very, very open, they are easygoing, they can get along with people easily, and they are open to new ideas, and they are very creative. The second trait, the second factor in fact, is conscientiousness. That makes people exercise self-control, that makes people hardworking and very, very cautious, because they are conscious people. Therefore, they always remain in control, they do not lose their calm or cool easily. They are very hardworking people, they are very cautious people, they approach their tasks, their assignments in a very cautious manner, and they do not compromise with rules and laws. Therefore, they are conscious. The third type of people have extraversion as the determining factor. So, extraversion as a factor means that you are sociable, you are talkative, you are assertive, and you can emotionally express yourself. This is a very important point in fact, because those who find it difficult to express themselves emotionally are the ones that are most susceptible to mental challenges or mental disorders. If you can express yourself emotionally, that means you will always be in the safe mode. You will be free from anxiety, and that's the reason why we come across some people who are worried all the times, and there are some others who are not at all worried. They do not experience anxiety at all, and that's one big reason, because they can easily vent, they can easily release these negative affects, and they do not have any social inhibition. They can easily talk about their mental challenges to people, and you can imagine how many people find it easy to talk about their mental issues or mental challenges to others. So people who have a personality that is influenced by this particular factor, extraversion, are absolutely sociable. They enjoy a wonderful social life which ensures their social well-being. They are talkative, they allow their voice to be activated, they are assertive because they are very, very confident, and they are emotionally expressive. Then we move to the other factor, that is agreeability or agreeable. Such people care for others, they show a lot of empathy, trust and concern for others. So they are very, very philanthropic in their approach or attitude. They are very agreeable people. Okay, if you score highly on this particular factor, that means you are highly agreeable. You care, you have empathy, you can quickly understand, you can quickly create relationships, bondings, because you show concern for others and you show that trust, and therefore people also trust you. So this agreeability element makes you trustable, makes you acceptable, makes you lovable. And then we come to the last factor, and that is an area we need to focus on, because we are going to talk about coping skills in time to come. So this is an area that we need to focus on, and I have for the sake of our convenience, I have marked these two areas extraversion and neuroticism. They are opposed to each other. If you score highly on extraversion, you are definitely going to score low on neuroticism. So we need to focus on these two areas as well. Neuroticism makes it that you have negative emotions all the time. You are visited by emotions like depression, anxiety, fear, and a lot of negative emotions that keep you disturbed all the time. And you also find it very, very difficult in overcoming stressful situations. What does that mean? That means you lack on skills, survival skills. If you remember, I talked about survival skills a while ago. So you need to develop those survival skills or coping skills so that you not find it difficult to overcome stressful situations. So neuroticism has it that people will be visited by negative emotions and they will always be in a stressful condition, which they will find extremely difficult to overcome. So these two areas in fact draw our attention. Therefore, I have marked these areas so that we can extend these areas when we start our discussion of those poetic pieces in time to come. So this is the most important thing when it comes to personality, that personality must lead to our well-being. So whenever we think about well-being, we come across the idea of subjective well-being, SWB. So subjective well-being can be ensured with or through a combination of these two things: affective balance and life satisfaction. If we enjoy affective balance in our life, we can ensure our subjective well-being. Affective balance, that means the positive or the negative effect a person experiences over any given period of time. For example, as a person, do I experience negative effect or positive effect over any given period of time? That's going to determine whether I have affective balance or not. Affective balance, in order to be ensured, we must ensure that the positive and the negative effects are in a balanced state in us. So this is a very famous method, PANAS, that is used to measure affective balance, because it's a self-report method. So this method is used, that is popularly known as positive affect, negative affect schedule. The other aspect is life satisfaction, which is determined by the quality of life we live or we lead, and two important factors that determine the quality of life we live are happiness and contentment. So if I can say I'm happy, I'm contented, then I can say I am satisfied with my life. So to measure life satisfaction, we have a self-report method, which is a questionnaire. So in combination of these two, that is affective balance and life satisfaction, we can in fact ensure our subjective well-being. And this can be possible when we take care of the most important aspects of our personality, that are thinking, feeling and behaving. So that's all for today. We come to the end of our discussion of personality. I'm sure you might have found these two lectures on personality interesting and insightful. I must also tell you that in order to develop and extend your ideas of personality, you can read more about these theories and concepts so that your idea of personality becomes clearer and better. So thank you for joining me. We'll meet again in our next lecture.